All right, guys, welcome back. This is video number 2 of the series. We are mixing this beat. So far, we've got our routing set up. Everything looks good to go and get started. So now we're going to dive into mixing the beat. Remember, if you just got here, don't forget to download the Ultimate Home Studio Setup Guide. Link in the description. It's a free ebook which tells you how to set up your home studio for the first time. It's very detailed, very helpful, and you're going to love it. So go download that. Don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, hit that notification bell to not miss our upcoming content. And without further ado, let's dive into this mix. All right, let's hear all of this kind of together. Just faders up, rough mix. All right, so that's the song, and now let's mix this thing. So usually first when I get started, I like to take care of drums and bass first. So let's have a look at the kick in particular and just make sure the tone is good and we can go from there. Because the kick is it's the heartbeat of the song. It's got to sound great and be punchy. Okay, nice. So a couple things come to mind. First is I'm going to try tweaking it a little bit with EQ, but also if it comes down to it, I might layer in a sample on this kick, a different kick sample. I feel like this could be fuller and thicker, but I have to keep in mind my 808 is pretty thick already. But let's just see what happens. Let's just loop a part of this kick here, and let's see what happens if I play around with some EQ. All right, so let's listen here. I'm soloing the frequency. Here's something good to know about a kick. 50 hertz is a really powerful part of the kick. So often I'll find myself boosting here. Another way to boost this without an EQ is to use a plugin called RBass. So I'm going to pull up RBass here. What you guys will learn in this video is that mixing is just, for me, it's just trial and error. It's I've been able to get some amazing results in my career just by trying things. And if it doesn't work, I take the plugin off. Put the plugin on, try it, see if it sounds better. Does it sound better than before or worse than before? How can I get it to sound as good as possible? How do I get this plugin working? And then I just I leave it, or I remove the plugin if it doesn't work. And it's okay for you guys to see that part of the process. I don't want to pretend that I'm perfect and I know what to do constantly. But one instinct told me, get some RBass on this thing, thicken up this kick a little bit, okay? So let's go down here. Did you guys hear that difference? Okay. So here's without RBass. RBass just generates low frequencies. So I'm generating a low frequency on this kick. So I went to 50. You guys saw how in here, right around 50, right? That's where our fundamental of this kick was, the fundamental frequency. So I'm going to put on RBass and bring in some of that fundamental. Do you hear how it thickens out already? What that's doing, though, is now it's clipping the plugin. So I'm going to bring this gain down a bit. Holy, that kick's a lot thicker. All right, so I'm going to put the RBass first. Wow, okay. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to low pass any information below here. I'm going to go natural phase, sounds a bit more natural. Let's see what's going on up here. I'm getting a really crunch saturated sound up here. I like it, but there's a boxiness to it that I think we can fix. So it's not around there, it's over here. Okay, usually somewhere between 200 and 400, I'll cut some kick out. So some boxiness. All right, let's listen to this. Okay, and I'm hearing one other thing ringing out in this EQ here. It goes like, whoo, whoo. No, wait, how? Right there. It's one of these. There. Did you guys hear that? So listen without. It's so subtle, but if I pull that out, it's going to clean up this kick. So watch what I'm going to do. Let me boost a little bit of the top end on this. All right, so let's hear without those plugins. Ugh. All right, and with, that's a kick. It's thumping. It's sounding really good. And that's just with 2 plugins. Last thing I'm going to do is maybe add a little bit of transient to it because I lost some of the smack with some of the stuff I did. So let's just, I'm bringing up, this is called Smack Attack. Let me go to a preset just to get us started. I'm going to go live kick, okay? And this is adding a lot of attack. This will be really loud if I just hit play because of all the transient it's adding. So I'm going to go dry, bring this in. Do you hear that transient that this attack is adding? Transient is the beginning of the note hitting. So it's adding clickiness to it. It's also, you can, this is a very nice visual plugin. You can see it's adding sustain, which is that. I don't necessarily want the sustain right now though. I just want some attack. So I'm gonna make it a little more wet. Let's hear. Hitting harder. Without. So this is just making it hit a little harder. It's smacking as the plugin is named, okay? Let's just start with that for the kick for now. I also really have to consider how it's going to sound with the rest of the song, and especially how it's going to sound with that 808 when we glue those together, okay? So I'll show you that in a moment, but next let's move on to the snare. Okay, so in a beat, the snare's really got to crack. It's really got to cut through. This is cracking a lot to my ears already. But what I can tell you is that it also sounds thin. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to bring back this R bass, and I'm also going to pull up this Fab Filter Pro Q3 again, okay? And I'm going to find the fundamental frequency. It's right there. Now, it's a really high fundamental frequency, but there's nothing really below it, you guys. And so one of the reasons that this snare is probably sounding thin is because that fundamental frequency is way up at like 270. You'll also get snares with fundamental frequencies in like the 100 territory, 200 territory. Way up here, it's just like a snare that's tuned up, and that's cool. But I also want this snare to be a little thicker, so it hits you in the chest a little bit, not the same way that the kick does, but a little bit. Okay, so. Nice. There's a nice crack to the snare, but I'm going to get this R bass going on the snare as well. And we're going to look around. See how I was just boosting it to look, but I've deactivated this EQ. This is not doing anything. That was just a look where the frequency is, okay? So I'm pushing this all the way up to the limit here. It only goes to 256, which is fair enough. It's a bass plugin, and that's kind of where bass is starting to end. So I think I can still get some juice out of this plugin. Do you hear that? Now let's hear if it can generate anything lower. Not really, because there's nothing there to saturate. So our bass is like saturating, which means like creating more harmonics on that fundamental frequency and just bringing it out. That's the reason why this plugin is better to use than an EQ for boosting. So that's sounding better, but one thing I'm noticing is now kind of that low end is feeling disconnected from the top crack. There's like this low, this like boomy fundamental frequency, and then this crack on the top and kind of nothing in between. Let's look around here. I'm hearing a little bit. I think this frequency is getting in the way. Let's hear it without. Let's hear me bringing that out. There we go. That smooths this out a little. I'm boosting a little bit here because I noticed some of those frequencies are missing a bit in the snare. So let's hear without this. And with. Okay, let's start with that. I'm hearing a harsh frequency in the snare that I don't really like, so I'm going to pinpoint that as well. Pull that out. Sometimes I just I hear the individual note and then I whistle it. So I'm getting like a. It's going to be right there. That was bugging me a little bit. I'm going to make that dynamic. Just pull that out a little bit there. Okay. Now, some engineers might be like, oh, this is like obsessing too much. I find it, if you can clean up the sound like right from the beginning, I think it's really going to help the song. So that's the way I do it. I've had some great results. Let's hear the snare. This is before, nothing. Okay. Here's with just R bass and Pro Q3. Nice. So it's lost a bit of the click and the transient. Technically, it hasn't lost it, but as we've boosted as we've boosted the lows and some of the mids in this snare, it doesn't sound like it's cracking as hard. So I'm going to bring some of that transient back with Smack Attack. I just copied over the settings here. There's some good presets. You can always just grab a preset, play around with it. But guys, like, remember, if there's anything to learn from this video, it's okay to try stuff and just have it. I've mixed hundreds and hundreds of songs and had a lot of have had very, very happy clients. Have had songs go to radio, major playlists, all sorts of things. And all I do is, I have a system and I know plugins that are going to work well and help me. But I try a lot of stuff. I don't always know exactly what's going to get me from point A to point B, but I can visualize point B in my head and kind of experiment and figure out my way there until I get there in the best way. That sounds the best. So this is all I'm doing here. Let's make this more wet. All right, 2 frequencies I'm going to pull back on, but I like the transient that's adding. So I'm adding another EQ right up here. That's it. Got it right away, okay? That was causing problems for me. There we go. Okay? Now remember, we can't always mix in solo. We got to hear things together. Let me add this kick in. All right. The more I like that snare, the more the kick is not doing it for me. So we might go back a little bit. Let me rebalance this a little. All right. No processing. All right. I think we're already making good progress here. What can I do to improve this snare? Let me see. I'm gonna, I could saturate it a little bit. That might sound good. Let me just add a little more crack on top first. The crack of the snare is really from like 6 to 10K. So I'm gonna boost there a little bit. I'm gonna add some snappiness to this kick too on top. I gotta be wise, do some gain staging here. So I'm gonna pull this output down and bring both of these guys a little bit lower, just a couple dB like this. That is gross kick frequency. No, is it down here? I think that's what it is. Nice. Okay. One thing I'm going to do on the snare is add a little bit of width to it, okay? So I'm going to use this plugin called Micro Shift. And there's a case where I would put Micro Shift directly on the track, and there's a case where I would put it on a parallel bus, okay? But I'm just going to put it directly on the track and show you what it does. So I went to this preset called Wide Snare Wide Snare Slap, tongue twister. Check that out as I go more wet. Now the key is do not overuse this. It has to be so subtle because our snares needs to stay down the middle, right? Now remember, as I go more wet, the track is getting quieter technically. Or not the track, but the snare that was in the middle is getting quieter. Okay, that's what's happening as I go more wet. And I don't want to change the balance that I've already got too much. So I have to keep that in mind. The more wet I go, I might need to turn this track up a little bit here. Or you can put it 100% wet on a bus, so, on a separate, like a return, and then you can just boost that return. That's another way to do it. Cool. I'm going to start maybe a little less. It's like so subtle. You could just hear a little bit of it in the sides. I may add reverb to that snare later, but a lot of the times in the beat, the drums are in like a beat like this. The drums will be super dry. So I don't know if I want to do that yet. Let me hear the hat and see how everything's gelling. Okay. I'm gonna mute a couple of these buses too, so I don't have to like solo stuff. But I don't want to add in too many elements yet. I really want to get the drums tight with the 808 and go from there. But let's get this hat started. Nice. Okay, couple things we can do. First thing is this can be louder. You can see the level's pretty low. I'm actually going to do this by boosting the clip. Okay, let's just start there. As we brought that hat out, I noticed there's harshness in the track itself. So we're going to use Soothe 2. You can use an EQ to do this. Make the EQ dynamic EQ, but this is an awesome tool that's going to help. Basically, it cuts out resonances. So there aren't a ton of frequencies going on in this hat already. It's mostly high frequency stuff, as you can see. But I think Soothe 2 will do a good job just like soothing that out right there around 6K. So let's go to Soothe 2. I'm going to go drums. I'm going to grab harsh hi-hat. Okay. The hi-hat that is the entirety of the hi-hat right there. So I'm going to change these settings a little bit. I'm going to disable that. I'm going to narrow in a lot here. Let me see. And I'm going to go delta just to hear what I'm taking out. Okay, I really want to narrow in on this. I'm going to go a little bit less aggressive, but more sharp. Sharpness helps me pinpoint. Here, have a look again. See sharpness? It's pinpointing the frequencies. Less sharp, it grabs a bigger chunk of frequencies. So I'm going to make this a little more sharp to really dial in on that harsh frequency right there. That's the one. Maybe a little this way. Make that a little wider. Okay. Let me go out of delta because I was listening to what I'm going to be taking out. So here's with this bypassed. And here's with it soothed. So I've lost a lot of that snappiness of the hi-hat. I don't want to take out too much, but I do want to smooth it out a little. So I'm going to take my mix down on this plugin. So there's barely anything. There's 100. I'm going to go like 70, 65. I'm going to go on the less side, okay? Because I do want this hi-hat to cut through. Let me try saturating it a little bit. I'm going to use a plugin from Soundtoys called Radiator. Let's just see what this does. Okay, so here's with nothing. Here's with some energy. Now this is adding a couple things that I don't like, adding some things that I do like. You can see Radiator brings in some frequencies down here. You can't actually hear these, they're so quiet. There's a frequency there, that's kind of nice. Now guys, some engineers might think this is obsessing over a hi-hat. I just think it's like, you got to smooth out your sounds a little bit. Get them sounding really good. If they sound good on their own, they're going to sound a little better when they join everything else. And then you kind of take the other tracks into consideration as well. But this is what I think is going to help. A lot of times with hi-hat cymbals, I'll boost the high end on them, kind of like this. And that can help too, to make them brighter. So I'm going to grab an analog style EQ and just boost, turn this off, just boost the highs a little bit on this. Make it just tiny bit brighter. Do you hear the difference? This is basically just making the whole hi-hat loud because lots of the hi-hat sits up there in those frequencies. But I am just trying to like scrape the top of it and just boost it and make it shine a little bit more. Okay. So here's with no processing. Here's with a little bit of processing. It basically just makes it pop, smooths out the harshness a little, makes it a little less harsh, makes it pop. I made it louder. Let's see how it gels with the kick and the snare. Nice. So now I'm getting the vibe that my snare needs a little more volume, maybe a little more transient. It just needed some volume, that's all. All right, now we got everything going to a drum bus, and let's put on just a little bit of compression. It may not help, it may help. Let's see. I'm gonna just use this mastering glue preset to get us started. Sometimes if you add a compressor, it can take the low end out of the kick, and I don't always want that, so I need to be careful of that here. All right, here's how I'm gonna add some energy to this. I'm gonna make a parallel bus to these drums. I'm gonna call it parallel drums. I'm gonna go like this. And I'm gonna send both of these to what I will just call like a percussion bus, which will be my kind of it's basically drum bus 2 is what this is. But I want both these going to the same place here. And then I'm gonna send that to my mix bus. And on this percussion bus, I'm gonna throw compressor. Let me go pumping drums. Let me just see how that sounds. I'm going to put on wet, take this analog sound off. That can introduce some noise that I don't want. And I'm going to mute this. We'll bring it in carefully because it'll be loud. And I got to put this up to unity gain. Okay, so I'm sending to this compressor here, which I'm bringing in parallel. Okay, it's going to blend. That's what parallel means. So you can see for the most part, this is hitting the kick and the snare. Those are the ones providing the most amplitude and force into this compressor. But let's hear what this sounds like with a bit of this pumping action. Whoops, here we go. Now it doesn't do a ton, it adds a little bit of energy. I'm gonna try a slightly different preset. I'm gonna go with the drums punch preset, and it's gonna add some punch, just adding some more transient to the compression that's going on. See, my output's a little bit hot. All right, so this is not doing a whole ton. It's just kind of like just adding a little bit of punchy compression on the side. If I was mixing a whole kit with like an acoustic kit with overhead mics and room mics and all sorts of stuff, that compressor would do wonders. In this case, it's just adding some punch and some snap to the whole thing, okay? So on my overall percussion bus where all this comes together, I'm gonna just grab a limiter, make sure everything's in check, okay? I'm gonna put on a preset. Let's go drum bus. Let's see, Punchimus Maximus. Is that like a Gladiator reference? Okay, I'm gonna unlink my transients and I'm gonna set this to 0, okay? I just want to, basically I want to make sure this isn't clipping. I could push this and really crush these drums, but I'm not going to do that yet. So the preset doesn't really come into effect so much. That's more how the limiter reacts when it's really being used. But I'm just making sure it's not clipping. And there we go. So that's the start of our drum mix. As we continue working on this track, we're going to introduce new elements. We might tweak this a little bit, but this is at least getting the drums started and gelling together. I really think once we dive into the 808, we're going to need to glue that to the kick. That might involve tweaking the kick, adding another kick sample. But here's how I get started shaping some of these sounds and getting the drum part of our beat taken care of. So if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next segment. Don't forget to go download the home studio setup guide in the description. You're going to love it. We'll see you soon.